The notification sound from Lumi's phone cut through the garage like a rusty blade. I was elbow deep in my Ford's engine, grease coating my knuckles, when that familiar ping echoed off the concrete walls. Nothing unusual there. My wife's phone buzzed more than a beehive in summer. But this time, something made me look up. "See you at 9. Can't wait for your lips," flashed across her screen before disappearing. I stood there, wrench in hand, staring at that phone like it had just sprouted wings. Lumi was inside, supposedly reviewing client files for tomorrow's big presentation, the same presentation she'd been preparing for every night this week. "Well, ain't that interesting," I muttered, wiping my hands on an old rag. And here I thought her biggest client was Henderson Manufacturing. The thing about being married for 15 years is you develop a sixth sense about your spouse's habits. Lumi used to leave her phone face down everywhere, never caring who saw what. Now she carried it like a state secret, clutching it during dinner, taking it to the bathroom, sleeping with it under her pillow like some digital security blanket. I walked into our kitchen, where she sat hunched over her laptop, designer reading glasses perched on her nose. Everything about Lumi screamed success these days: the tailored blazers, the perfect manicure, the way she held herself like she owned every room she entered. Her promotion to senior account executive at Morrison & Associates had transformed her from the small-town girl I married into this polished, untouchable version of herself. "How's the Henderson presentation coming along?" I asked, grabbing a beer from the fridge. She didn't look up. "Fine. Complex stuff. You wouldn't understand the intricacies of corporate branding strategies." There it was, that dismissive tone that had become her default setting with me, like I was some knuckle-dragging caveman who couldn't possibly grasp the sophisticated world of advertising and public relations. "Right," I said, taking a long swig. "Just us simple logistics managers, moving boxes and scheduling trucks, real caveman work." I didn't say that, but her tone suggested otherwise. I watched her type, noting how she angled the screen away from me. 15 years ago, she used to read me funny emails and share office gossip. Now her work life was classified information. "Late meeting tomorrow?" I asked. "Probably. This Henderson project is make or break for the agency." Henderson again. Must be some demanding client. Her fingers paused over the keyboard for just a moment. Very demanding. I finished my beer and headed upstairs, but my mind kept circling back to that text message. "Can't wait for your lips." Not exactly the kind of message you send about quarterly profit margins and brand positioning. That night, I lay in bed listening to Lumi's steady breathing, my old army training kicking in. In the service, we learned to pay attention to details that didn't fit the pattern. Right now, my wife's behavior was setting off every alarm bell I'd developed during 2 tours overseas. The next morning, Lumi left early for her breakfast meeting with the Henderson team. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her things. Her home office was immaculate, everything organized with military precision. But tucked behind her computer monitor, I found a receipt from the Grand View Hotel downtown. Room service for 2, charged to her company credit card. The date was last Tuesday, the same night she'd claimed to be working late at the office. "Henderson Manufacturing," I said aloud, reading the receipt again. Funny how their meetings require hotel rooms. I photographed the receipt with my phone, then carefully replaced it exactly where I'd found it. If Lumi wanted to play spy games, she'd picked the wrong opponent. I might just be a logistics manager who moves boxes for a living, but I'd learned a few things about surveillance and intelligence gathering during my time in uniform. The rest of the day dragged by like molasses. I tried focusing on work, coordinating shipments, managing drivers, solving the 1,000 small crises that kept our distribution center running. But my mind kept drifting back to that hotel receipt and the text message. Around 5 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a message from Lumi. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I stared at that message for a long moment, then typed back, "No problem. Hope Henderson appreciates all your hard work." Her response came back immediately. "They do. Very appreciative." "I'll bet they are," I thought grimly. That evening, I drove downtown and parked across from the Grandview Hotel. It was the kind of place that catered to business travelers and people who wanted discretion, nice enough to impress, but not so flashy that it attracted attention. Perfect for clandestine meetings. At 8:30, a silver BMW pulled into the valet area. I recognized the driver immediately, Zane Whitaker, regional director at Morrison & Associates. I'd met him at a couple of company parties where he'd made a point of mentioning his expensive watch and his vacation home in the Hamptons, the kind of guy who used words like synergy and paradigm shift with a straight face. 20 minutes later, Lumi's red Audi joined the BMW at the valet stand. I watched through binoculars as she stepped out, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something black and clingy that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. Zane met her at the hotel entrance, and even from across the street, I could see the way he touched her lower back as they walked inside together. Not the casual contact of business colleagues, but the intimate gesture of lovers. "Well, well," I murmured, snapping photos with my phone's zoom lens. "Henderson Manufacturing sure has an interesting management structure." I sat in my truck for another hour, watching the hotel entrance and thinking about the past 6 months. All those late meetings, weekend conferences, and business trips that seemed to multiply like rabbits. Lumi's new wardrobe, her sudden interest in expensive perfume, the way she'd started going to the gym religiously. The signs had been there all along. I'd just been too trusting or too stupid to see them. When I got home, the house felt different somehow, emptier. The family photos on the mantel seemed to mock me with their frozen smiles and false promises of happily ever after. I walked through rooms that suddenly felt like a museum of my own naivety. In my workshop, I pulled out my laptop and started doing what I should have done months ago. Real research, social media profiles, company directories, cross-referencing dates and locations. It didn't take long to piece together the timeline. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Zane Whitaker, married father of 2, had joined Morrison & Associates 8 months ago. Lumi's late nights had started 7 months ago. Her promotion had come 6 months ago, right around the time Zane would have been settling into his new role and looking for allies in the company hierarchy. "Ambitious little climber, aren't you?" I said, staring at Lumi's LinkedIn profile photo. She looked confident, successful, untouchable, the kind of woman who gets what she wants, regardless of who gets trampled in the process. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of my workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always been my refuge. But tonight they offered no comfort. Tonight I was planning something entirely different. My phone buzzed with another message from Lumi. "Heading home now. Meeting ran really late." I checked the time, 11:47 p.m. Must have been some marathon business session. "Drive safe," I typed back. "Can't wait to hear all about it." But as I hit send, I realized I was lying. I didn't want to hear her lies and fabrications. What I wanted was justice. What I wanted was revenge. And thanks to my years in the Army and my current job managing logistics for half the city, I had both the skills and the connections to make sure Lumi and her boyfriend got exactly what they deserved. The game was about to change, and they had no idea they were playing against someone who'd learned strategy from professionals. The next morning, I woke up before dawn with the kind of clarity that comes from finally understanding the truth. Lumi was already in the shower, humming some tune I didn't recognize, probably something she'd heard during her business meeting last night. I made coffee and sat at our kitchen table, watching the sunrise paint our backyard in shades of gold and amber. This house had been our dream once. We'd picked out every fixture together, painted every room, planted the garden that Lumi now ignored completely. Funny how dreams can turn into prisons when you're not paying attention. "You're up early," Lumi said, appearing in the doorway wearing her silk robe and a guilty expression she probably thought looked innocent. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." She poured herself coffee and sat across from me, close enough that I could smell her expensive shampoo. "Work problems?" "Something like that." I studied her face, looking for tells. "How was your meeting last night?" "Productive. We made some real breakthroughs on the Henderson account." "That's great. Zane must be pleased with your progress." Her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. Just for a second, but I caught it. "How do you know Zane's involved with Henderson?" "Lucky guess. He's regional director, right? Figured he'd have his hands in all the big accounts." "Right. Yes, he's very hands-on with important clients." "I'll bet he is," I thought, but kept my expression neutral. "Well, I'm glad you're making such a good impression. This promotion has really opened doors for you." "It has," she smiled, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married. "I know I've been distracted lately, but this opportunity could change everything for us." "Change everything," I repeated. "Yeah, I can see that." After she left for work, I called in sick and drove to Colby's bar. Colby Varon had been my best friend since high school, and his place served as the unofficial information exchange for half the city. If you wanted to know who was cheating on whom, who was about to get fired, or which businesses were in trouble, Colby's was where you came to find out. I found him restocking beer in the cooler, his weathered face breaking into a grin when he saw me. "Kellan Brooks, as I live and breathe. Little early for drinking, even for you. Need information, not alcohol." "Ah." He straightened up, suddenly serious. "What kind of information?" "The kind that might hurt to hear." Colby nodded and gestured toward a corner booth. We sat down, and I told him everything. The text message, the hotel receipt, last night's surveillance. He listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. "How long you been suspicious?" he asked when I finished. Honestly, part of me knew something was wrong months ago. I just didn't want to believe it. And now? Now I want proof, real proof, the kind that holds up in court. Colby leaned back in his seat. "You thinking divorce?" "I'm thinking scorched earth. She wants to play games? Fine. But she picked the wrong opponent. Kellan, I've known you since we were kids throwing rocks at old man Peterson's barn. You're not the revenge type." "Maybe not, but I'm learning." Colby studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "What do you need?" "Everything you can find out about Zane Whitaker. Where he lives, where he hangs out, what his wife knows. Also, I need to know who else at Morrison & Associates might be covering for them." "That's a tall order. I've got time." Colby pulled out his phone and started making calls. Within an hour, I had a complete dossier on Zane Whitaker. Married to Jennifer, a pediatric nurse, 2 kids, ages 8 and 10. Lived in a McMansion in Riverside Heights, drove the BMW I'd seen last night, and had a reputation around town as a smooth talker who thought his charm could open any door. "Here's the interesting part," Colby said, sliding a printed photo across the table. "This was taken at Morrison & Associates' Christmas party last year." The photo showed Lumi and Zane standing close together near the punch bowl, her hand resting on his arm while they laughed at some shared joke. But what caught my attention was the timestamp, December 15th. 2 weeks before Lumi had even mentioned there was a new regional director at her company. "She's been lying longer than I thought," I said. "Gets worse. My buddy Rick works maintenance at the Grandview Hotel, says your wife and Zane have been regulars for months. Always the same room, always charged to the company account." I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, but something more calculating, more dangerous. "I need to get into her phone," I said. "That's risky territory, brother." You get caught. I won't get caught. Colby shook his head. You're talking about crossing lines you can't uncross. She crossed them first. That afternoon, I went home and waited. Lumi returned around 6, claiming she'd been in meetings all day. She seemed relaxed, almost cheerful, and I realized this was probably how she looked after spending time with Zane, satisfied and glowing with the thrill of deception. How was your day? She asked, kissing my cheek with lips that had probably been on another man just hours earlier. Quiet. Gave me time to think. About what? About us. About where we're heading. She paused in the act of opening the refrigerator. What do you mean? Just seems like we're living separate lives lately. You with your career, me with mine. Sometimes I wonder if we're growing apart. Don't be silly. But her tone was distracted, like she was already thinking about something else. Marriage goes through phases. This is just a busy time for me. Right. The Henderson account. Exactly. That night I waited until Lumi was sound asleep, then carefully extracted her phone from its charger. I'd done my research, and with the right software, I could clone her entire device in about 20 minutes. The tricky part was doing it without waking her. I crept downstairs to my workshop and connected her phone to my laptop. While the cloning software did its work, I sat in the darkness, thinking about the woman sleeping upstairs. When had she become a stranger? When had I become someone she felt comfortable lying to? The software finished its work with a soft chime. I now had complete access to Lumi's text messages, emails, call logs, and photo gallery. I disconnected her phone and crept back upstairs, replacing it on the charger without disturbing her sleep. Back in my workshop, I opened the cloned data and started reading. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Months of text messages between Lumi and Zane, starting with professional discussions and gradually becoming more personal. Then intimate. Then explicit. They had pet names for each other. She called him Z. He called her Angel. They made jokes about their respective spouses, referring to me as the mechanic and Zane's wife as the saint. But the messages that really got to me were the ones where they discussed their future together. Lumi talked about leaving me once she'd secured her position at the company. Zane promised to leave his wife after his kids graduated high school. They fantasized about trips to Europe, about the apartment they'd share, about the life they'd build together. I was reading about the systematic dismantling of my marriage, planned and executed with the cold efficiency of a corporate merger. There were photos too. Lumi in lingerie I'd never seen, posing in what looked like a hotel room. Zane, shirtless, flexing for the camera like some middle-aged fitness model. Pictures of expensive gifts, jewelry, perfume, clothing, all the things I'd assumed Lumi had bought for herself with her promotion bonus. The final insult was a group chat that included several people from Morrison and Associates. They called it the Inner Circle, and it was full of gossip about office affairs, company politics, and casual cruelty toward people they considered beneath them. My name came up several times, always as the punchline to some joke about Lumi trading up or finally getting what she deserves. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, processing what I'd learned. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was actively planning to destroy my life while her colleagues cheered her on. They thought I was some pathetic fool who'd never figure out what was happening right under my nose. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I spent the rest of the night planning. By sunrise, I had a comprehensive strategy that would systematically destroy everything Lumi and Zane had built together, both professionally and personally. It would take time, patience, and careful execution, but I had advantages they didn't know about. I knew their schedules, their meeting places, their weaknesses. I had access to their private communications and financial records. Most importantly, I had something they'd lost along the way: the ability to think clearly and act decisively when the stakes were high. The war was about to begin, and they were walking into it blind. 3 days later, I put the first phase of my plan into motion. Lumi had another late meeting scheduled, her third this week, and I knew from monitoring her messages that she and Zane would be at the Grandview Hotel by 8 o'clock. I arrived early and positioned myself across the street with a clear view of the valet area. This time, I came prepared with a professional-grade camera borrowed from my friend Tony, who ran a private investigation business on the side. If I was going to document their affair, I wanted evidence that would hold up in any courtroom. At 7:45, Zane's BMW pulled up to the valet stand. He stepped out wearing an expensive suit and the kind of confident smile that suggested he thought he was untouchable. The valet took his keys with the practiced deference reserved for big tippers. Lumi arrived 10 minutes later, and I watched through the camera lens as Zane met her at the entrance. This time he didn't just touch her back, he pulled her into a full embrace and planted a lingering kiss on her lips, right there in public where anyone could see. I snapped a dozen photos of their reunion, then followed them inside. The Grandview's lobby was all marble floors and crystal chandeliers designed to impress clients and intimidate competitors. I'd worn my best suit and practiced looking like I belonged there, just another businessman conducting affairs in neutral territory. I took a seat in the lobby bar with a clear view of the elevators and ordered a whiskey. Lumi and Zane were at the front desk, checking in with the casual familiarity of regular customers. The desk clerk handed over a key card without asking for identification. They were obviously expected. As they walked toward the elevators, I heard Lumi laugh at something Zane whispered in her ear. It was a sound I remembered from our early dating days, when everything I said seemed hilarious and charming. Now, she was making that sound for another man. They disappeared into the elevator, and I checked my watch. According to their text messages, they usually spent about 2 hours together before heading home to their respective spouses. That gave me plenty of time for the next part of my plan. I finished my drink and walked outside to the valet area. Zane's BMW sat in the front row, gleaming under the streetlights like a trophy. I pulled out my keys and approached the car, looking around to make sure no one was watching. The key scraped along the driver's side door with a satisfying screech, leaving a jagged line from the front fender to the rear bumper. I walked around to the passenger side and repeated the process, then used the key to carve a message into the hood. Liar. The valet attendants were busy with other customers, and the security cameras were positioned to watch the hotel entrance, not the parking area. I slipped away unnoticed and returned to my truck, where I waited for the show to begin. At 10:15, Lumi and Zane emerged from the hotel looking relaxed and satisfied. They were holding hands now, no longer bothering to maintain professional appearances. Zane walked her to her car, kissed her goodbye, then headed toward the valet stand. I watched through binoculars as the valet brought his BMW around. Even from across the street, I could see Zane's face change when he spotted the damage. He walked around the car in disbelief, his hands gesturing wildly as he examined the scratches and the word carved into his hood. Lumi hurried over to see what was wrong, and I could read their lips well enough to follow the conversation. Zane was furious, talking about security cameras and police reports. Lumi kept looking around nervously, probably wondering if someone had seen them together. After about 10 minutes of heated discussion, they both got in their respective cars and drove away. I followed at a safe distance, curious to see how they'd handle this first warning shot. The next morning, I was in my workshop when my phone buzzed with a text from Lumi. Someone vandalized Zane's car last night, scratched it up pretty bad. He thinks it might be related to some business deal gone wrong. I typed back, "That's terrible. Some people have no respect for other people's property." I know, right? He's really upset about it. I bet he is. Probably cost him a fortune. The insurance should cover it, but still, it's so random and malicious. Random, I thought with grim satisfaction. Nothing random about it. Over the next few days, I monitored their messages to see how they were handling the incident. Zane was paranoid, convinced that someone was watching him. He wanted to move their meetings to a different hotel, but Lumi argued that changing their routine would look suspicious. "It was probably just some punk kid," she texted. "Don't let it ruin what we have." But Zane wasn't convinced. "What if it's Jennifer? What if she's having me followed?" "Your wife doesn't suspect anything. She's too busy with her patients and the kids." "Then who? Does it matter? We'll be more careful from now on." Their paranoia was exactly what I'd hoped for. Doubt and suspicion were corrosive forces that would eat away at their confidence and make them sloppy. And sloppy was exactly how I needed them to be. The following week, I escalated the psychological pressure. Using information from Lumi's cloned phone, I sent anonymous messages to several people in their social circle, hinting at inappropriate relationships within Morrison and Associates. Nothing specific enough to be actionable, just enough to get people talking. I also started showing up in places where I knew they'd be. When Lumi mentioned meeting clients at Romano's restaurant, I happened to be there having dinner at the bar. When Zane posted on social media about his morning coffee routine, I made sure to be in line behind him at Starbucks. I never approached them or made my presence obvious, but I made sure they saw me. Just a glimpse in their peripheral vision, a familiar face in unexpected places, enough to make them wonder if it was coincidence or something more deliberate. The effect was immediate and gratifying. Their text messages became increasingly anxious. Lumi started asking Zane if he'd noticed anything strange lately. Zane began checking over his shoulder and varying his routes to work. "I feel like someone's watching us," Lumi texted one evening. "Me too. Maybe we should cool things down for a while." "No, I won't let some random creep control our lives." "It might not be random, Angel. What if it's someone who knows about us?" "Like who?" "I don't know. But this doesn't feel like coincidence anymore." I smiled as I read their messages. They were starting to understand that their actions had consequences, even if they didn't know who was delivering them. But I was just getting started. The car scratching and psychological games were merely the opening moves in a much larger strategy. I had months of evidence documenting their affair, detailed knowledge of their routines and weaknesses, and a growing network of allies who were happy to help once they learned what Lumi and Zane had been doing. The next phase would target their professional lives, where they thought they were untouchable. Morrison and Associates prided itself on maintaining high ethical standards and family values, at least in their marketing materials. I was about to test how committed they were to those principles when faced with evidence of senior employees conducting affairs on company time and company money. Lumi thought her promotion made her invulnerable. Zane believed his regional director title gave him immunity from consequences. They were both about to learn that power without integrity was just a longer fall to the bottom. I spent that evening in my workshop, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, planning their professional destruction with the same methodical care I'd once used to plan military operations. Every detail mattered. Every move had to be calculated for maximum impact. By the time I finished, I had a timeline that would systematically dismantle everything they'd built together. Their careers, their reputations, their future plans, all of it would crumble under the weight of their own choices. They'd started this war when they decided to betray their marriages and mock their spouses. Now they were going to finish it, whether they wanted to or not. The Morrison and Associates building rose 23 stories above downtown, all glass and steel designed to project success and stability. I'd been there exactly twice, once for Lumi's promotion celebration and once for their annual Christmas party. Both times, I'd felt like an outsider looking in at a world where I didn't belong. Today, I walked through the marble lobby like I owned the place. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment, researching the company's structure, policies, and key personnel. Morrison and Associates marketed itself as a family-friendly organization that valued integrity and ethical behavior. Their website featured smiling photos of diverse employees and testimonials about work-life balance. Perfect. That made what I was about to do even more devastating. I took the elevator to the 15th floor, where the Human Resources Department occupied a suite of offices decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and excellence. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, looked up as I approached her desk. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'd like to speak with someone about a confidential personnel matter," I said, handing her a business card I'd had printed for the occasion. It identified me as a private investigator specializing in corporate misconduct. Technically true, since I'd gotten licensed online the week before. Her smile faltered slightly. "What kind of personnel matter?" "The kind that could expose your company to significant liability if not handled properly. I have documentation of senior employees engaging in activities that violate your code of conduct." "I see. Let me get our Director of Human Resources." 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from Margaret Chen, a stern-looking woman in her 50s who radiated the kind of authority that comes from years of dealing with workplace drama. She examined my business card with the skeptical attention of someone who'd seen every scam and scheme imaginable. "Mr. Brooks, what exactly are you alleging?" I opened my briefcase and pulled out a manila folder containing carefully selected evidence. Photos of Lumi and Zane entering the hotel, printouts of their more professional text messages with the explicit content redacted, and copies of hotel receipts charged to company accounts. "I'm alleging that 2 of your senior employees are conducting an extramarital affair on company time, using company resources, and potentially creating a hostile work environment for other staff members." Margaret's expression didn't change as she reviewed the documents, but I could see her jaw tighten with each page. When she finished, she set the folder aside and folded her hands on her desk. "These are serious accusations. What's your interest in this matter?" "I represent concerned parties who wish to remain anonymous. My clients are worried about the ethical climate at Morrison & Associates and the potential legal ramifications if this behavior continues unchecked." It was a careful dance, providing enough information to be credible without revealing my personal involvement. Margaret was clearly experienced enough to read between the lines, but she couldn't prove anything without more investigation. "I'll need to verify this information," she said finally. "Of course. I should mention that I have additional documentation if needed, including evidence that other employees are aware of this situation and may be covering for the individuals involved." That got her attention. A simple affair was bad enough, but a conspiracy to cover it up could expose the company to discrimination lawsuits and regulatory scrutiny. "I'll need time to conduct a proper investigation." "Naturally. But I should warn you that this information won't remain confidential indefinitely. My clients are considering their legal options, and they may decide to take this matter to the State Ethics Board or the media if Morrison & Associates doesn't take appropriate action." It was a polite threat wrapped in professional language, but Margaret understood exactly what I was saying. Handle this internally and quietly, or watch it become a public relations nightmare. I left the building feeling satisfied with the morning's work. Within hours, Margaret would be reviewing security footage, interviewing employees, and building a case file that would make Lumi and Zane's affair a matter of official company record. That afternoon, I drove to Riverside Heights and parked outside Zane's McMansion. It was the kind of neighborhood where every lawn was perfectly manicured and every house looked like it had been designed by the same committee. Impressive, but soulless. Jennifer Whitaker was working in her garden when I approached, wearing old jeans and a faded t-shirt that made her look younger than her 40-something years. She had the kind of natural beauty that didn't need enhancement, the opposite of Lumi's carefully constructed glamour. "Excuse me, Mrs. Whitaker." She looked up, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. "Yes?" "My name is Kellan Brooks. I think we need to talk about your husband." Her expression shifted from polite curiosity to guarded concern. "What about my husband?" "Maybe we should discuss this privately. It's a delicate matter." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded toward the front porch. "What's this about, Mr. Brooks?" I sat down beside her on the porch swing and pulled out my phone, showing her one of the photos I'd taken outside the Grandview Hotel. Jennifer's face went pale as she recognized her husband embracing another woman. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "A few weeks. I've been gathering evidence." "Why? Are you a private investigator?" "No. I'm the other woman's husband." Jennifer closed her eyes and leaned back against the swing. "I've suspected for months, but I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. Zane's been working late, taking weekend trips, buying new clothes, all the classic signs. I'm sorry you have to find out this way." "Are you? Or are you here because you want something?" I had to admire her directness. Even in shock, she was thinking clearly. "I want justice," I said. "For both of us." "What kind of justice?" "The kind that makes sure they face real consequences for what they've done, not just a quiet divorce where they walk away and start over somewhere else." Jennifer was quiet for several minutes, staring at the photo on my phone. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and determined. "What do you need from me?" "Access to Zane's financial records, his computer, anything that might show how long this has been going on and how much company money they've spent on their affair." "That's a lot to ask from someone you just met." "Yes, it is. But I think you'll find I'm very good at keeping my word." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Zane keeps his laptop in his home office. He thinks I don't know his password, but I've seen him type it 100 times. What are you planning to do with whatever we find?" "Make sure everyone knows exactly who they really are." "Including their employers?" "Especially their employers." Jennifer smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Good. Zane's been treating me like I'm stupid for months, making excuses and telling lies. Time he learned that actions have consequences." That evening, while Zane was at another client dinner, Jennifer and I went through his computer and personal files. What we found was even more damaging than I'd hoped. Zane had been using company credit cards to pay for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and gifts for Lumi. He'd also been padding his expense reports to cover personal purchases and had been sharing confidential client information with Lumi to help her advance her career. "He's been embezzling," Jennifer said, staring at the financial records. "Not huge amounts, but enough to constitute fraud." "And your wife's been using insider information to steal accounts from her colleagues?" I added, reviewing emails where Zane shared details about upcoming client presentations and budget negotiations. We copied everything to encrypted drives and organized the evidence into a comprehensive file that painted a picture of systematic corruption and abuse of company resources. By the time we finished, we had enough documentation to not only end their careers, but potentially result in criminal charges. "What happens now?" Jennifer asked. "Now we make sure this information reaches the right people in the right order. Morrison and Associates, the State Ethics Board, maybe the local business journal. Depends on how cooperative they are when confronted with the evidence." "You've done this before, haven't you?" "No, but I'm a quick learner." Jennifer walked me to the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. "Mr. Brooks? Thank you. For the first time in months, I feel like I'm not going crazy." "Call me Kellan, and you're not crazy, you're just married to a liar." "So are you." "Not for much longer." I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, thinking about the conversation I'd had with Margaret Chen and the evidence Jennifer and I had compiled. In less than 24 hours, I'd set in motion a chain of events that would systematically destroy everything Lumi and Zane had built together. Tomorrow, Margaret would begin her official investigation. By the end of the week, both Lumi and Zane would be facing disciplinary hearings that could end their careers. And that was just the beginning. I still had their personal lives to dismantle, their social circle to turn against them, and their future plans to reduce to ashes. They'd thought they were so clever, conducting their affair right under everyone's noses, while making jokes about their naive spouses. Time to show them what naive really looked like. The call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. I was in my office reviewing shipping schedules when my phone buzzed with Lumi's ringtone. Her voice was shaky, barely controlled. "Kellan, I need you to come home, now." "What's wrong?" "Just come home. Please." The line went silent. I stared at my phone, knowing exactly what had happened, but needing to see it play out. Margaret Chen had moved faster than I'd expected. I found Lumi pacing our living room like a caged animal, still wearing her work clothes, but looking disheveled and wild-eyed. Her perfect composure had cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. "They fired me," she said without preamble. "Morrison and Associates terminated my employment effective immediately." I set down my keys and tried to look surprised. "What? Why?" "They're claiming I violated company policy. Misuse of resources, inappropriate relationships with colleagues, breach of confidentiality agreements." Her voice rose with each accusation. "It's all lies, Kellan. Someone's trying to destroy me." "That's terrible. What kind of inappropriate relationships?" She spun around to face me, her eyes blazing with fury and something else, fear. "They think I'm having an affair with Zane Whitaker." "Are you?" The question hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. Lumi's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. "How can you even ask me that?" "Because my wife just got fired for having an affair, and instead of denying it, she's talking about lies and conspiracies. So I'm asking you directly, are you having an affair with Zane Whitaker?" "Of course not. Zane and I work together on client accounts. We've never been anything more than colleagues." I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos I'd taken outside the Grandview Hotel. "This looks pretty collegial." Lumi stared at the screen, her face cycling through shock, anger, and calculation. When she looked up, the woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "You've been following me. I've been trying to understand why my wife has been lying to me for months." "You hired a private investigator." "I didn't need to. You weren't exactly subtle about it." She sank into our couch, her hands shaking as she processed the implications. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to document everything. The hotel receipts, the text messages, the photos, the financial records. All of it." "You went through my phone." "Among other things." Lumi's face hardened as the full scope of her situation became clear. "You did this. You're the one who got me fired." "No, Lumi, you got yourself fired. I just made sure the right people found out about it." "You vindictive bastard. Do you have any idea what you've done? I'll never work in this industry again." "Good." The single word hit her like a physical blow. She stared at me in disbelief, probably seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "Good? You destroyed my career, and you think that's good? I think it's justice. You want to cheat on your husband and mock him behind his back? Fine. But you don't get to keep the life he helped you build while you're doing it." "I never mocked you." I pulled up the group chat messages on my phone and started reading aloud. Quote, "The mechanic actually thinks I'm working late on the Henderson account. He's so clueless, it's almost sad." End quote. Should I continue? Lumi's face went white. "You don't understand. That was just venting. Everyone complains about their spouse sometimes. Everyone doesn't plan to leave their spouse while stealing money from joint accounts to fund hotel rooms with their lover." "What are you talking about?" "The $15,000 you moved from our savings account to your personal checking. The money you told me was for your professional wardrobe but actually spent on gifts for Zane and romantic getaways. That money was mine. I earned it. We earned it. This is a marriage, Lumi, not a business partnership where you get to cook the books." She stood up abruptly, her hands clenched into fists. "What do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I made mistakes. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. Work things out. No. What do you mean, no? I mean this marriage is over. I've already filed the divorce papers. You'll be served tomorrow. You can't do this. I won't let you destroy everything we've built together. Everything we built? You mean the house I pay the mortgage on? The cars I maintain? The life I've been funding while you spend our money on your boyfriend? Zane isn't my boyfriend. I showed her another photo, this one of them kissing outside the hotel. What would you call him? Lumi stared at the image, then suddenly lunged for my phone. I pulled it back, but she managed to scratch my wrist with her fingernails before I got clear. Give me that phone. You have no right to those pictures. Actually, I have every right. They were taken in a public place, and they're evidence of adultery in a no-fault divorce state. My lawyer says they'll be very helpful in asset division hearings. Your lawyer? Did you think I'd go into this unprepared? I've been planning this for weeks, Lumi. Every move, every contingency. You're not the only one who can think strategically. She collapsed back onto the couch, the fight going out of her as the reality of her situation sank in. What about Zane? What about him? Did you get him fired too? Zane got himself fired, just like you did. His wife. Jennifer knows everything. She's filing for divorce and taking the kids. Apparently, she's been documenting his behavior for months, just waiting for proof. Lumi put her head in her hands. You've destroyed both our lives. No, I've revealed who you really are. There's a difference. What happens now? Now you figure out how to rebuild your life without using me as a foundation. The house goes on the market next week. I've already moved your things to the guest room. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Kellan, please. I know I made mistakes, but 15 years of marriage has to count for something. It did count for something. It counted for me giving you every opportunity to be honest with me. It counted for me ignoring obvious signs because I trusted you. It counted for me building a life around someone who was planning to abandon it the moment something better came along. I wasn't going to abandon you. Really? Then explain the apartment listings you bookmarked, or the job applications you submitted in other cities, or the text messages where you and Zane discussed your future together. Each revelation hit her like a hammer blow. She'd thought her secrets were safe, protected by passwords and privacy settings. She'd never imagined that her husband might be smart enough to uncover them. You went through everything. Everything I could find. And what I found was a woman who'd been systematically planning to destroy her marriage while pretending to be a loving wife. That's not true. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how someone who loves her husband spends months planning to leave him while stealing his money and mocking him to her friends. Lumi opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. There was no explanation that would make her behavior acceptable, and we both knew it. I want you out of this house by the end of the week, I said. After that, all communication goes through our lawyers. You can't just throw me out. I have rights. Yes, you do. You have the right to find somewhere else to live while we divide our assets, according to the prenuptial agreement you insisted on signing. Her face went pale. The prenup. The one that protects individual assets and assigns fault in cases of adultery? That prenup? You never thought you'd get caught, but you did, and now you get to live with the consequences. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. She sat on our couch looking small and defeated, nothing like the confident woman who'd been planning my replacement just hours earlier. For what it's worth, Lumi, I really did love you, past tense, but you ended that when you decided I wasn't worth basic honesty and respect. Kellan, wait! But I was already walking out the door. I had a new life to build, and it didn't include room for people who thought loyalty was optional and marriage vows were suggestions. Behind me, I could hear Lumi starting to sob. Once, that sound would have broken my heart. Now it just sounded like justice finally being served. The war was over. I'd won. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again.